Well, hello everyone. It's of course RPG with DBJ. Why else would you be here? Today is Future Friday. Tend to We like to get together and talk about any and all things that are future related, sci-fi, RPG related, that kind of thing. And of course, you guys can come to me with particular subjects. I tend to uh, guide more towards the transhumanist side. But if you guys want to talk about alien civilizations and those kind of things, that's fine too. But today, I thought I try to talk about something a little bit more RPG specific, and that is high tech heists. Um, the idea of the Mission Impossible style, more or less, even a spy thriller, breaking and entering, infiltration, inserting yourself maybe as a spy or a thief or a hacker into high-tech settings. Morning there, sir. Vince, how are you, sir? If you want to join in, you can as well. All right, but I wanted to talk about high-tech heists and specifically a unique way two role-playing games use heists. And although you might have to change your mindset about how to think about them, once you wrap your head around how they've shaped the narrative, you'll be able to understand how heists are done. I know I'm dodging around the subject, but I'll get there. All right. So the idea of a heist pretty much is one or more individuals have a mission to accomplish. For the most part, a heist tends to have plenty of interaction with technology, the environment, vehicles, buildings, traveling from one place to another. Oftentimes, it's done very subtly, sneaking around, maybe using disguises, hiding in the back of vehicles or something, stealing something from cargo. And usually the heist involves getting a MacGuffin, going through a process of getting the MacGuffin, and then retrieving the MacGuffin and then escaping out with it. Really great heists tend to require, you have a team, tend to require the skills and talents and timing of everyone in that particular group. So if you have someone very strong, you need that person to engage in like combat or something, fighting or lifting or breaking something. If you have someone very smart, maybe they are a hacker. There's any number of things. So sure. So in terms of a heist, first of all, you have to consider the skills that everyone has. So a skill could be, am I buffering? Please tell me I'm not buffering. The skills that the individuals have is dependent upon the kind of heist they have. So if they are quite brilliant individuals, those brilliant individuals will be required to program something or analyze data. If the individuals are relatively skilled in hand-to-hand combat or some other type of interaction, you really need to have a heist that is framed around their abilities. So if someone is very good at deception or wearing disguises, give them the ability to wear a disguise. Now, Scott posted, just rewatched the 12th Doctor heist episode. Yeah. So there.
Hello.
Hey, Vince. Morning there, sir.
I'm just jumping in.
Morning or my side. Yeah, it's talking about this was brought up in the Discord, and Prue suggested talking about heists, and I thought I'd combine it with high-tech heists and a couple of ground rules in creating a heist, a really good heist, and using them in RPGs. And I really did want to talk about two games, Leverage,
Shadowrun.
Shadowrun's got tons of heists. Although
it's basically based around heists.
Yeah. Even the whole cyberpunk styled future dystopian, or I guess future urban dystopia, tends to be based around heists. There's only two classes of people. You've got, the super rich living in the giant arcologies, and then the downtrodden street samurai and whatnot running around, and the fact that they have to maybe kidnap someone or steal some information or whatever. I mean, essentially they're criminals. Sometimes I've heard people mention, how do you have an evil campaign? And Shadowrun, technically, you're playing criminals. And
sure,
yeah. So
I think making an evil campaign is not as hard as most people think it would be, because even though you're playing someone evil doesn't mean you're stupid. That's a big difference. And that's something you have to learn first. Just because you're evil doesn't mean you have to kill everyone you meet.
Yeah, I know I know players like to devolve down into pulling their guns and shooting any NPC that's around, but like you said, it's not necessary and not very smart in a world where death is around the corner all of the time.
Yeah. Making too many enemies is a sure way to getting yourself killed. That's basically a fact. If you want to do something evil, just don't let yourself get caught, or don't leave any traces.
Yep.
And that's hard if you're just killing anyone you see. So yeah, that's that. But coming back to heists, I think it's interesting to see different evolutions that happened recently, because something like Blades in the Dark is a lot based around heists, but you actually don't do much planning. You basically just come up with a basic plan, and then you make an engagement roll to see how good it went and how many obstacles basically GM puts in your way with stuff that didn't happen as you planned.
Yeah, it's that game and Leverage, which isn't as popular, but it uses the same reframing system, and it's quite unique. Scott Poe says, it's just not the rich in those arcologies got to house those wage slaves too. Yeah, you got to do that, but I think they're innocent. But Blades in the Dark and Leverage, essentially the system is simple, but the way it's framed is a little bit bizarre to those of us that play role-playing games. So if I can
it's not based around a simulation of what you do. That's what happened usually in Shadowrun. You are like, okay, we do that. We get our blueprints. We bribe the guards. We make this and that, and just in case something happens, we have like 3 backup plans or whatever. And in Blades in the Dark, you basically assume that the characters do this stuff, and you can do flashbacks while in mission to establish what already happened. So it's a bit something you have to wrap your head around. For example, in Blades in the Dark, I made a character concept which doesn't go on the run, but can still influence the run because he's just good at prepping stuff. Yeah,
it's almost okay. I'll try to describe the system as simple as possible. So the players are able, instead of having a long series of plans, the game master, the one running the game, will set up how difficult the situation is, or a series of difficulties, and the players, while engaging in the heist, they're able to make a roll, and based on the success or failure of that roll, they then can describe in hindsight how it is they got a particular benefit or detriment to that role. I'll give you an example. We played in our Blades in the Dark, we had a chase. We were in horse-drawn carriages, and we were being chased through the streets. And for those who don't know, Blades in the Dark is like a pseudo, like neo-Victorian style setting.
Yes,
So we're
Thief or Dishonored or Thief. That's pretty much the world it plays in.
yeah, and we were in horse-drawn carriages, cutting around corners and things, being chased by the authorities, or what amounts to the authorities in this particular location. The cobblestone streets, we had firearms. What would they be called? Like a very at that time they were very rudimentary firearms. I think we had like one-shot pistols or something.
Yeah, muskets and stuff.
Muskets, yep, and very much dark noir, like Three Musketeers almost. It's kind of a weird way to describe it. So all of our gang, our as player characters, we're in these horse-drawn carriages and we're racing down the street. And we, at one point, we make a turn and one of the players makes a roll, and there's a difficulty set. Make the roll, gets a really good success. Then we describe what it is we did previously to the chase that helped benefit us. So, for example, we said, well, what we did is we paid off another gang that when we made this left turn to go down this alleyway, the gang would then come out of the dark and like push a bunch of like trash cans and debris and things in the way so that the guards wouldn't be able to follow us. So we didn't set that up previously. We made the game master had a difficulty. We had about 5 or 6 basically difficulties in succession, and we had to try to beat 3 or more of them, essentially, is how the chase went. And we described it as like, okay, you makes a roll, oh, we got a success, so we go down the alleyway and then the guards are stopped because we pass by, and then this other gang throws up like walls and debris and such, and then we go another way, and then, oh, there's more guards coming after us and they've got muskets, and they set up a barrier in front of us. And so then what was happening is we were describing how it is we could get ourselves out of the situation. For example, at one point we're being chased down the street and they set up a barricade in front of us. And so another player character makes a roll. I don't remember the stats, but essentially it was like a charisma type roll and got a really good success. And then said, well, what happened was 3 days prior, bribed the head of the guards to allow us to pass. And so, and at the time we were just like, well, are we going to try to ride and blow through the barrier or something like that? He's like, no, don't worry about it. And had this great idea that as we were coming, we actually paid off the guards previous to the situation in the first place. And then so they opened up the barriers and we were able to run through. And it's a very strange way to describe things, because I know sometimes player characters like to think, like you say, you were describing Shadowrun in a linear fashion. Like, I am going to talk to the guard and bribe the guard. Okay, that's done. And then the other player character says, I'm going to hack the system to get the floor plans or to put a virus into the security system and play it in real time. Whereas Blades in the Dark and Leverage say, listen, let's not go through the planning phase. Let's go into the action, and then using certain benefits or penalties that the players roll, we're going to then describe how it is that the heist was modified in hindsight to let that person get to that position.
Yeah. I think the thing is, there are a lot of players who play Shadowrun, for example, who really love this planning phase, who just sit and do entire sessions, or maybe two, 3 sessions, planning one run, and doing the run then takes maybe 1 hour or 2 hours, because they plan basically for everything. But I think that's still a very niche amount of players who really love planning that much and preparing for every little possibility which could happen. I think most players are just like, let's get into the action. And if you can then have mechanics to use to say that something happened before is, I think, a pretty neat mechanic in that way. And also, you can't just make up everything, because you still have to, if you, for example, said you bribed the head of the police to let us free from capture, you wouldn't just be able to do that. You have to play out that scene. You have to maybe make a couple of rolls. You have to maybe bribe them with really large amounts of money, etc. So it's not just, I can make up bullshit like that's now happening. Suddenly I have a military behind me which repels the policeman or whatever. But you still have to make it somewhat reasonable. It has to fit the fiction.
Yeah, it's almost, I wouldn't say it's a micro game, but in many ways it fits that mold. Like it's not a separate set of rules. It's just that, like you said, there is a matter of playing through that little interaction. So the player that, let's say the player that wants to bribe the guard, like you said, maybe 3 days hence, they have an interaction in a bar. And so the player character has to then, act out, hey, I'm talking to the guard talks to me, the guard asks for, like you said, a substantial amount of money. The guard then says, hey, I need a favor, and play out that scene a little bit, and then have the die rolls associated with it. And of course, it has to fit in with the narrative and the capabilities of that particular player character. Like, they can't just say, oh, I just bribed the guard, and you're like, well, you don't have any resources or money, and really that's not even your character's specialty. This may not work for you and your player character. So, but I do like that fact, because it's one of the problems with the traditional Shadowrun heist is that it's very easy for it to get out of hand. Multiple sessions of planning. Some players like to go shopping. Let's say they like to open the book and shop for all the necessary gear. There's you always have to have don't have to have, but you always have a situation where you have the hacker who already has skills that makes them a little bit separate from everyone, and then that can become a little bit of a hassle for a game master that is not able to juggle the interactions with the hacker and the rest of the group, or the drone pilot or whoever. So yeah, I can understand why some game masters are like sitting there twiddling their thumbs, like, guys, just go on the run, stop planning.
Yeah, but I think it's also it's a different approach, because when you plan yourself, you basically don't use your characters that much. You don't just assume, if you're doing it narratively like Blades does, you just assume that your character is competent enough to plan for eventualities, that they are good at reacting to problems instead of planning for everything. Because I think it's even mentioned in Blades that you can't plan for everything, that a real group of criminals or real SWAT team or whatever can't plan for everything. They're just trained to be good at reacting when something goes wrong. And that's I think it's more interesting approach, first of all, and second of all, in Shadowrun, those players who actually know the game and the game world are heavily favored. Even though they may not have the optimal characters, if they know how this game world works and how the security measures work, how guards work, how the organizations work, they have a huge advantage over new players, because they just know who they have to bribe. They know what to look out for, etc. And in Blades, you don't have to have that. A new player can be as competent as a veteran.
And I definitely agree. And you would definitely need to understand that dynamic, because for new players, and like you said, new players in Shadowrun, if they're not familiar with the setting at all, or even in many ways, even familiar with that neo-dystopian cyberpunk world, if they're new to it, the game masters really needs to use a light hand in dealing with them, just because it's a very different way of playing. It's not at all like Dungeons and Dragons. There's a high tech world, and you have to deal with computer systems and organizations uh, that are extremely competent and have lots of resources, and the player characters tend to be on the especially in the beginning, tend to not have very many resources or places to go, things that they can do, unless, like you said, they're familiar with the setting, in which case they know how to pull on the strings that give them the best advantages. And so I think Blades in the Dark is very much, you can sit down with a number of players, like you said, new or veteran, and really just get into the game. But with Blades in the Dark and like Leverage, you also need to have a level of buy-in, a level of trust between the players and the game master, because games like that, games like Fate, where it instead of taking a mechanic and describing it, instead of mechanic first, narrative second, these systems take narrative first and mechanic second, meaning that the narrative shapes what they want to have happen, and then they have a mechanic to back it up. And sometimes shaping that narrative, some players will try to really stretch the boundaries of acceptance to get what they want, to have the mechanic help them out.
Yeah, that's the big problem, because if you have someone who wants to power game, then he really can in those systems, just as long as he can come up with a good reason why he could be able to do so. But I think still it's limiting, because in a lot of ways, a mechanical game, you can just always say, but the rules say I should be able to do this and that. And in a narrative game, you still have to have narrative reasons for everything. If you don't have narrative reasons, you can't do anything. And so you basically are forced to have either a very competent and very complex character, which makes it vulnerable for the GM usually, or you have to come up on the fly with really good ideas all the time, which can be fun. So I think it's harder to really be a disruptive power gamer in narrative games.
Yeah. I tend to think of those type of games as a very easy way to find those players that are power gamers, because they will show their heads very early in that style of game, whether it's like Fate or something like that. Even with Blades in the Dark, is for the individual. In the game that we played, at one point, someone wanted to say that the basement was filled with barrels of explosive powder, and the game master's like, that's taking it a little bit too far. Like really, how would, like you said, it was stretching the boundaries of the narrative. Like, there's no way you would get 20 tons of explosive gunpowder into the basement of your enemy's gang and blow up their building and their whole headquarters. That's just stretching things a little bit too far. No matter how good of a role you get, and so you can have those situations.
Yeah. But I'm just asking myself, you wanted to do something about high-tech heists,
yes,
or science fiction heist. What do you think is different about science fiction or high-tech heists in comparison to something like Blades in the Dark, which isn't very high-tech from our perspective?
My idea for thinking about high-tech heists, I think our best examples are Mission Impossible style heists, in which the technology itself creates the hazards that you have to, and obstacles you have to get around. So the biggest one are sensors, heat sensors, motion sensors, thermal things that have weight, alloy doors, tumblers that you have to figure out combinations, and having a series of those to deal with, I believe, is like the epitome of the high-tech heist. But you also have situations where the mixing of technology and people. So a character is in a disguise, they have an ID, the guard has to swipe the ID to let them pass. The guard looks at the character and is like, I don't think they're dressed right. But another player character maybe has to go into the system to allow the fake ID to look real, and then card is swiped. Oh, it's good. The guard says, well, maybe it's just me, lets the person go through. So I think being able to it's the game master can throw in high-tech situations, whether it's stealing a car or falsifying an identification or getting past thermal sensors or something with, like, I don't know, cold blankets or what have you, are ways that you can set up a heist with high technology. And of course, since we're talking the future, many of those things already exist today. So now if you have like androids and robots and drones and nanotechnology, yeah. and me, I love the environment. I mean, having, going into like zero gravity and having to maybe jump across a huge expanse in space, because they have to, maybe the player characters have to be in spacesuits to go from one place to another and use cables or something, and they know it's very dangerous because the habitat is spinning at a great rate that being outside they won't be able to keep up with or something. Or maybe there's debris, or they have to watch out for robots that are on the skin repairing little micro punctures or something. I love that kind of stuff. So
yeah, for me, it's the problem with all these sensors and robots and stuff is that in most RPGs I know, something like computers or hacking in modern settings is either way too strong or completely useless. So for example, if you have like 10 different kinds of sensors, you could just say, okay, I'm hacking everything. And then you have to come up with a good subsystem or a good idea why it's not that easy to do so. And to be honest, the only game I know that does this halfway competently isn't even an RPG. It's Invisible Ink. Do you know that game?
never heard of it.
It's basically a heist simulator, round-based strategy, similar to something like XCOM or something. And the interesting part is that the player characters themselves don't hack. They just gain energy for an AI to hack. And to get this energy, they have to get to specific consoles inside the map and reroute energy to the AI. And then the AI can use the energy to hack specific points in the game. And you always have to think about how much of this energy can I use now? How can I generate more energy? What ability can I use now? Is it still on cooldown, etc.? And I think that's pretty neat subsystem. It's a bit complex, but I think it's a neat idea to not just have someone hacking from the outside. You still have to be there. You have to provide energy for the hacker, and you can still have a bit of variance inside it, and you have a lot of decisions to make: what to hack, what not to hack, and sometimes these things are rebooted, and you have to hack them again, and whatever. And the firewalls increase with time the longer you take. That's an interesting approach. I'm still waiting for an RPG who does this right, to be honest, because Shadowrun does this, but it has a very complex subsystem for it. And to be honest, I'm playing a hacker in my current Shadowrun game, and it's just too hard sometimes, and sometimes it's too easy. It's super weird to do something like that.
I definitely agree. And Scott Poe brings up something that it is a very easy way to limit the power of a hacker, because he says in a world with common hackers, some systems will be off the grid, and I absolutely agree with that. I think as a default, there would be especially secure places would have a default where either areas would just either cut themselves out of a grid, or they just wouldn't be in the same system anyway. So you would need to either be there or at least be very close and work with the team to, for example, let's say from outside, the hacker is able to get them through the guard tower. But once they get onto the property, now they have to physically be there to plug into the system or wirelessly be close to various systems. I think the problem, what I see as a problem, is that we tend to look at hacking. We tend to want to make hacking a simulationist thing. So we look at real life hacking, or the way we would like to perceive hacking, and try to make separate rules than the rules that are presented in the game.
I think that's the big problem, because the perceived hacking from movies and series and something like that, that's basically like magic. Let me hack into the Pentagon, it just takes 15 minutes or whatever. That's nothing to do with real hacking, because real hacking takes a long time, or you need a lot of human engineering, where you just get a person to give you access, which is the easiest way for a hacker, as far as I know. So basically, you get the technician to open a specific website or open an email, and then you basically have access through him. So you have to find some kind of door to access it. The problem is that the perceived action of hacking from a normal person today is that hacking is somewhat abstract and magical, and we don't know how it really happens, but it somehow is able to do basically everything. It's a bit like magic. If you see current crime shows and they have a computer specialist, they are basically the thing when they don't know how to progress the story any further. The hacker just found something or made something, and suddenly they can progress. I just hacked all the security cameras in the city and found this one specific car.
I know you're right, because sometimes they'll you'll see, like you said, you'll see a crime show and they just go, we found the car, because apparently there's cameras and networks everywhere. There's suddenly a satellite that can just zoom in on a license plate, and oh, by the way, I've researched the backgrounds of like 87 people in the company, and you're going, well, wait a minute, all of that information isn't in one location. It's not.
Yeah. Every time I watch Criminal Minds, man, oh man. Yeah, it just got through all the documents, and there's a sealed document for this person, and it just opened it, and whatever. It's all digital available for some reason.
No matter where they're from, where they were born, they've got all their parking tickets in one location, and pictures of them on vacation, and you're going, deeds to homes and property they've owned, and all their bank accounts, and you're going, you know what? If it's that easy, because most of us would never be able to find all those documents on our own, legally paying for them and asking for them, let alone have a hacker find them in some strange, nebulous way. But, translating that into a game, to gamify that, I think it behooves us to try not to make it a separate system and give it parity with the other player characters. And I think that's where the problems come in, that the hacker becomes something else other than the player characters, when I think it actually is best to have a game is essentially have, I'm using Dungeons and Dragons here, to have like the armor class and the hit points and the attack rolls, but just frame it as a hacker, and then so that each person gets to take their action in the exact same amount of time and space, and then go from there.
That's what they're trying to do in Shadowrun, where they basically made a different world for the hacker to be in a heist. So every server is a different world, basically, and they have to interact in this world. The problem is that they are not using the exact mechanisms that everyone else uses. They still have their own actions. They still have their own stuff they have to do first. For example, in Shadowrun 5, you have to get marks. So basically, registration from everything you want to use. So if you want to copy something, you have to have one mark on it, and you have to use an action to put a mark on it. And so in a time a normal character can mow down like 3 enemies, you have to do a mark, and then the next action you could do something useful, and that's a bit weird. And that's one of the problems. They try. I think they're on the right track, doing this stuff with Shadowrun, but I think they're not quite there yet.
Yeah, that can be, like you say, just unfortunately, even with a very good hacking system, you still have the problem that you have two variables. You've got the dice and you've got the people who are using it, and that adjusting that for all the variations in that, it can be very difficult.
Scott says something.
Mm-hmm.
That brings up a great idea. The team moving through the building, stealing passwords, so the hacker can get to the next area and disable some stuff for the team to move to the next password. I thought about something similar, to be honest. Something like subnetworks, and you have to physically plug in to the subnetwork to be able to hack it. So you can't just go from outside. So you have to have an actual physical connection. And so basically you get into the first room, the security room, and maybe you can hack now this hallway and these kinds of rooms. But if you want to go to the next section, you have to physically go in there, find the console, and plug in, and then you can hack again. And I think that's would be a neat subsystem for that specifically.
Yeah, and that would actually allow you as the game master to kind of say, like, okay, this section of the building, you've broken in, you've hacked it, everything in this particular section of the building, and maybe even giving some protection for the player characters, whether they control the defense systems, the sensors, locking the doors, but not the rest of the building, whether the building you have to go like deeper, like the shell, like an eggshell, you just have to go smaller, 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 or whether it's like the west side, the north end, the basement, the rooftop, and each section would be a different subsystem for them to break into. Or if you want to make it a little more complicated, you could say like, okay, you can affect the sensors, but the doors and windows are a separate function, and then the air conditioning, heating system is a separate function. The garage doors and vehicles are a separate function. You could even divide it up that way as well.
Yeah. There is an interesting other game which does something similar. It's called The Sprawl, which is basically a dungeon world in Shadowrun with dungeon world rules. And if you do a hacker in there, then you basically have a move where you hack into a system and then you get holds, so basically points, and you can spend these points to do specific stuff inside the system. And once these points are out, you have to roll again. And every time you roll, you have you could get alarm raised and stuff like that. And I think it's a pretty interesting method, but I think that's falling off of the other side of the horse, as we say in German. So you basically have it too simple to be able to simulate something interesting. You can basically make up everything with these points, and you can just wing it all the time. And yeah,
I think it. I don't mind. I tend to fall on the simpler side of rules, because I think narratively there's a lot of space you can play in. But I do get the fact that if it's too simple, then it becomes.
It's not really a mechanical challenge anymore in any way.
Right. So I think also with getting back to the general heists, in general, the physical power of the heist, in many ways, it's almost like obtaining points to win. So, and I'm speaking this in general. Like, for example, the game master says, okay, you have to break into a corporation, and we have a program, and you have to switch out break into their network and insert this particular program into their network and escape. And you don't want to be seen. The problem is that there's no drama if everything goes as planned, right? Like in many ways, you really don't want things to go as planned, because just like in media, the best part of, like, what was the very first Mission Impossible where he's got to dangle off of the rope,
and then the red comes in, and the guy suddenly gets back into the room, and they have to pull up again, and stuff like that. That's what they try to simulate in Blades with the engagement roll, which you do at the start of the mission. It basically mentions how many complications you have until you get what you want. And something like the red would be a complication, the guy coming back in would be a complication, etc. And you can basically just manage how many complications you have to overcome to get what you want. And I think that's more interesting than having just the GM bullshitting this, because you basically, if you are doing a simulation game, something like Shadowrun, you basically have to come up with stuff the players haven't thought about, or maybe have thought about but hoped wouldn't happen. So you can surprise them and make a nasty surprise for them, because you can assume that they didn't plan for everything, but what if they did?
Yeah.
Then you have to maybe change something. Maybe the schedule changed, or maybe some official came in and they had to improvise now, or maybe their cover is blown for some reason, or something like that. And it's basically the GM is bullshitting basically all the time. You have to come up with a reason why the players aren't as competent as they thought they were.
Yeah.
And it's a bit weird, I think.
Yeah. Of course, Scott Poe says that systems that are fun, of course, is superior, but I'm a player who likes crunch. I loved older Shadowrun systems, and yes, I also like to role play even in a crunchy game. Yeah, I don't have problems with crunchy games, but one of my favorite game systems is GURPS. I don't talk about it very much because
never played it,
because it's GURPS. But I love GURPS. But I love the fact that it goes there in many ways.
I think the crunchier games have their advantages. For example, building a character in Shadowrun is so much fun. Holy shit, this is much fun, because you can turn every little notch, and you can try to make exactly what you want, and later in game find out if it worked, how you imagined it, how you pictured it. And you can try to find advantages here and there, and try to basically, it's more of a game. It's not that much role playing. It's more of a game, an actual game which you have to learn and get better at. And I think that has a huge appeal for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think that also crunchier systems, it tickles a part of the brain, that a different part of the brain than a more narrative system. Almost I understand that there's nasty language in our RPG community when it comes to like crunchy systems versus like rules light systems and things. I'm far too positive about those things. So I'll say that I think that there are many people who love the beauty of numbers and the way that they fit, and it can, I think it sometimes feels odd. It's like a room where all the furniture and the things in it are out of place, and the person that wants to put them in place because it doesn't look right. It's like the carpet's on top of this chair. No, the carpet needs to be on the floor. The chairs are all stacked in the corner. No, they need to be around the table. And the problems I see is that if you're a new player versus someone who knows how the game system works, that becomes almost like meta knowledge before the game starts. And it puts the player who's very new at a disadvantage if someone else wants to use that against them.
Yeah, and I also think that something like that isn't as entertaining as in a narrative game. I'm currently listening to a Shadowrun podcast, and they're basically an actual play just. And they, if they have any conflict, it's so boring to listen to. You just, okay, I rolled. I have 4 hits. Okay, roll your damage. Okay, I roll resist. Okay, you do it 2 damage. And that's basically all that happens for like half an hour, an hour. And that's just so boring to me. I know it can be engaging for the players to see how they can squeeze out a bit more dice, or maybe find it a good tactical decision to make in this specific situation. But if you listen to it, or if you want to be engaged in the story or in the world, it's just such a killer for me, having something like that all the time, every time there's a conflict.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of some of the most popular actual plays downplay the actual game use, which can be, which I can understand.
They still did that. They cut out every time they rolled. They just said how many hit they got and cut out every time they rolled. So you have to cut it down a bit. But even still, then it was over an hour sometimes for one combat.
Wow, wow, that's incredible. I get it, but yeah, listening to it is a lot different if the players aren't like ramping up the energy of doing it, because when you're talking about the numbers and how the game works, and like, oh, I rolled 8d6, and 4 of them are 6s, and you get into those things.
Yeah, I think you stay at the mechanical level more a longer time. You don't you forget to describe stuff, because something what feats do I got? What abilities do I got? What equipment do I got? Okay, I have to look up this, I have to look up that, and then I have to add everything and do the math how many hits I got and how many I need for this specific action I'm doing. And it's just so much stuff to keep in your head, and then describing it in an interesting or entertaining way also makes it even harder. And that I think that's a big detriment to the whole game. I mean, it can be interesting. I'm playing Shadowrun, so I know it can be interesting, but it's a very specific type of game for a very specific type of player, I think. And I think personally, narrative games are a lot easier to get into and to get excited about.
Yeah, I have to definitely agree with you. The downside is that because narrative games tend to have a lot less rules, um, some veteran players that want that crunch, they'll easily bump up against it and go, wow, there's not really much here game wise. Not that the narrative isn't changing, but that the die rolls or what you need, the modifiers and things like that, tend to, pretty much you could figure those out after about 2 or 3 games, and realize that there's not much there. Like Fate is a perfect example of or the poster child of extreme narration, and then not very much, like almost nothing when it comes to like the whole concept of like the die rolls and the mechanics in the system. And then a lot of games followed after it that do the same thing.
Maybe we should get back to Heists.
Yes. So, well,
we got a bit off track here.
Yeah. So, well, talking about Heists and doing that is we were talking about the players that want to plan for the heist, and then all the problems that go wrong or can go wrong with a heist. Yeah. And I think one of the mistakes is that if a plan has any failures, the entire heist goes wrong. And I think that's
a big problem.
Right. Taking the example of Mission Impossible, the very first movie, the gentleman, they have to break into the system to get the knock list, and the computer programmer has to leave the room for a certain amount of time, and he decides to come back into the room. sometimes we tend to think, oh well, if a player fails a roll or a guard happens to walk into the room, that all of a sudden the entire plan just craps out, and that
Yeah.
doesn't need to be the case. It could be that the players, maybe this plan takes longer than it should. Maybe there's it
There's just
maybe
more. Maybe the guards are just more active,
right,
doing more patrols. Maybe ordering some backup.
right,
Maybe they just have a higher alarm rate. I think the big problem is that they are usually just like you have either no awareness from the guards or everything. You have just the point where the alarm goes off is basically like the oh shit button. Now we have to fight.
right, and that's right, and that's not always the case. I mean, how many? If we, I know this is kind of strange to say because you know it's a role playing game. We're talking real life, but in real life, people's reactions uh, vary based on the circumstances they're in. A guard that hears an alarm, maybe the guard thinks, "Oh man, this alarm has gone off 6 times this evening. I'm going to turn the sound off." Click, and puts his feet back up to drink his coffee. Maybe another guard comes by and complicates the issue, but they're not looking for the player characters. Maybe the guard is like, "Hey, let's get a card game going," or "I ordered pizza," and 5 other guards come into the room to turn on a sports, game, a game of football, soccer, or something, and the players are like, "Wait a minute, I need to sneak past." At first, I only needed to sneak past one guard. Now there's 5 in the room. What am I going to do now? And so what I'm saying is like sometimes simple things, maybe a truck backs up against a gate or something, and the player could normally go through the gate, but now the truck's in the way, so now they have to figure a way around it. Whereas maybe the truck was parked there just because the driver needed to find a parking spot, or someone tries to go through security, and something completely unrelated happens in the room while the player is trying to go through security for security to run, and maybe a woman passes out, maybe a delivery driver has a stack of boxes and they all fall to the ground. Maybe there's another delegation or something trying to enter into the same location, and so more guards run to the room, but they're not focused on the player characters. They're focused on something else in the other corner of the room. So I think there's ways to make things difficult, or when there's failures, to ramp up the hazard of the failures, without it being a direct result of the PCs being wrong and the enemy going after the PCs.
Yeah. I think what Blades also does, which you could use in other games too, is the clocks they use. It's basically a way to abstractly see when something will happen if it doesn't happen in one roll. So you basically have a 4-segment clock, and if you have a failure, you get 1 segment. If you got a partially success, you get 2. And if you got a full success, you get 3 clocks on the clock. So you could make more segments. You could make clocks which basically like alarm goes off as a clock. And basically every time someone is caught, or every time the guards maybe suspect something, you just fill in one of the segments. And when the segment is full, they raise the alarm. And you can still do actions to lower the amount of segments that are marked off. So you basically have something like a dynamic mechanism, and also something that's not just you basically bullshitting it. When does the guard pull the alarm? How many attempts do the players have? Some GMs would say if it's nothing too major, maybe they have 10 attempts or whatever, or they will never pull the alarm if not someone is killed or whatever. And some other GMs will like, okay, you failed your first sneaking roll with the street Sam, and now have fun killing everyone.
Yeah. Oh, Blades. I love Blades in the Dark's clocks. It is very. I like mnemonics like that. Meaning like it, calling them clocks and making them look like that pie-shaped clock. really and ticking each one off really sets in the minds of the players and the game master like this is a ticking time bomb. This is something that will happen if these certain parameters are not met. It's getting closer, closer, closer. Boom. Runehammer's game, ICRPG, he does something very similar to that, which is very essentially it's just a tension die. You take a D4, you roll it. Whatever the result on that die is harm will befall you this number of rounds. And it could be the guards pass. You roll a D4, you get a 3. Okay, every 3 rounds the guards are going to pass by, or a security sweeping drone flies overhead, or something of that nature, so that the player characters know. And this is done like the clocks. This is a metagame thing. Like this is you're not hiding this as a game master. It's face forward. Like this is the number, this is the die, this is the chart we're using. We're letting you see it because in game your players, the characters may not know it, but they know the tension is coming. They know that danger is around the corner. But as the player, you're looking directly at it, and this is a great way to for everyone to see as the timer counts down or the skill rolls aren't made or what have you, that okay, we're all agreeing when this reaches 4, when this pie fills up, the guards are coming after you, and then the players can then act and react to that. And I think that's a great. Sometimes the other dirty word is metagaming. Those are great things to use as a metagaming, not rule but system that I think really works.
Yeah, but I personally think metagaming has a very bad what's the name?
Like a bad
reputation. Bad reputation, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if it's done right, and if it's done to advantage for the game, it can be a good thing. It's something I had to learn for a long time, because usually you're like, every metagaming is basically false. You have to be inside your character's head all the time, and you never have to think in mechanics way. But if you're doing that, you basically robbing yourself of a lot of narrative or mechanical tools to make things more smoothly and more easily to react to. You can make stuff more interesting. If you all agree on certain things, you are allowed to metagame.
Yeah, absolutely. Even okay, one example is this was on a podcast where the game master says, he's like, I don't hide my monsters' stats and abilities. I let them know that the AC and the hit points and such. And his reasoning was that the adventurers are professionals. They know what's coming. Why they would instinctively know by their skills how tough these things are. And so he says sometimes he hides it. He says after a while, just put it on the table. They know what they need. The die rolls, they know exactly what's going to happen. He says just let it flow. Let the players know. And he says he doesn't really have any problems with it, and it makes perfect sense within the narrative that they know the capabilities of, especially far lesser conflicts that they've passed by before. It's like, hey, if they fought trolls 3 or 4 times, whatever, just put the stats on the table. Not a big deal.
Yeah. I think the more you assume that the characters are actually competent, the more you should be allowed to metagame, because then the characters should know how the world operates they are in. And that's basically nothing else than knowing how the stats actually work inside the game. That's interestingly enough, I've recently saw an anime where they had built in the metagame in the setting, where the characters knew their own stats. It's basically like a blessing from a god. And once you have the blessing, the god can basically whenever you gained experience, can level you up or increase your stats, and they can actually see the stats. They can enchant a piece of paper and show you your stats and how much you increase in what attribute and whatever. And I think it's weird to think about, but maybe there's a world where this makes total sense.
Well, in many ways, a high tech world. What's there's an implant, like a biomonitor implant,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That gives you your heart rate and your blood pressure and your oxygen levels or something. In some ways, maybe that's even kind of like that. Like,
Sure.
what's the heads up display that gives you distances and speeds and ratios and motion. I mean, in some ways that actually could correspond kind of to.
You could make benchmark tests or whatever and see how you value compared to the average Joe, to other agents or whatever. And maybe they have benchmarks to how much can you punch, how intelligent are you, how many logical things can you make, how much information can you process in a given time or whatever. It should be able to process all these things. Maybe even social stuff, which you can, how easy you are able to see emotions of others, or hidden agendas of others or whatever. It should be able to measure all these things, and maybe there are stat blocks for highly trained agents or shadow runners or whatever, so you can see what you actually will get. Maybe that's how you gain new jobs. You just show, okay, that's what I'm actually capable of.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too, and also that's a lot less pressure on the game master to be upfront with a lot of the stats, because then that you spread a lot of the work with the players. If the player's the hacker, and you just go, listen, here are the stats that you need to overcome in this system. Well, I'm not going to hide them from you. This is above board. This is what you need. Everyone else knows this is what you need to. Narratively, your computer system knows the defenses of this system, because you've I don't know, maybe your hacker organization has seen these defenses, so it knows the
You
parameters.
simply analyzed it, made penetration tests
Mhm.
for the firewall or whatever. In Shadowrun, you can even do that. There are roles which are called metrics perception, where you can see the level of the defenses you are trying to overcome. You can see how strong the firewall is and whatever. There is a mechanical way to see how the mechanics work in that world, and it even makes sense to refer them as such. This is a host of levels, level 4. It would make sense for the character to actually say that.
Right. I mean, even like this is an example from war movies. You'll have submarine commanders, and they'll send out a ping, and it'll detect the other submarines, and then they go, "Hey, we have a database of the other submarines, and this is what those submarines are like. This is what their crew is like, what their weaponry is like." It makes sense, even in a high tech world, to say, "Hey, this building has these defenses, and we know that the walls are level 20. We know that the camera systems are level 18." Like, because we've seen this before and are comparing it to what we have in front of us now, which might correspond directly or indirectly to the numbers in the game. Hey, it has an AC of 17. Oh, well, it's a level 17 defense system, just as an example. Yeah. And then one last thing I will say about heists is that setting up the before the guards lay down the law, and you have everyone starts pulling out their guns and start shooting everything. Creating a heist that spreads the spotlight around to the different players, I think, is really important, which is another metagaming thing, but necessary. So if you have a character, if one of the players is a face, they're the person that's social, they talk to everyone. give them people to talk to and deceive and lie to and wear a disguise or something. If there's a hacker, give the hacker something to do. If there's a driver, give the driver something to drive around in or whatever. Of course, it can. Okay, like a television show, it can be a little predictable because each person always gets to do the one thing that they're always good at all the time.
Suddenly, they have a helicopter for some reason, and they always build the mad machine at the end, and yeah,
that can be a little bit too on the nose. But if you scatter around a number of clues and then let the players jump on it, I think it's better than this is the only vehicle. Hey, you're the driver. You can drive that one vehicle. Instead of doing that, you can say, oh, well, you go into the garage and the garage has a number of vehicles down there. And then the hacker's like, oh, well, you can lay the groundwork, I think, as a game master, and the players will just latch onto it themselves.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to say, because if you're playing a specific type of character, you should always know how to make advantage of what you actually capable of. If you're playing a face, but there usually isn't a way for a face to interact. For example, there's a base where only drones are, where no normal guards run around. You could fast talk. Maybe you could get the person who controls the drones. Maybe you could get people in, maybe to get them switched up. Maybe you can get something in advance, talking to some employees or whatever. You should always have the capability as a player to know what you can do, even if it doesn't look like you can do much. And you should always have something like a backup plan. You shouldn't be over-specialized. For example, if you're playing a hacker, you should be able to do something else than hack. If you only can hack and can't combat, can't talk, can't do anything else, then you are well deserved to be useless in a environment where there is nothing to hack.
Yeah, and a lot of times, to me, with crunchy systems, that's when you have the individual who they're not really playing a character, they're playing a build.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the life cycle of a build is very short because you're either extremely good at what you do, in which case you dominate every situation you're in. And that makes it boring for the game master and makes it a bit boring for the other players as well, because they just have to sit back and watch you dominate whatever specialty you're in, or you're useless because then when it doesn't work, you have no other options. Like you said, hey, my character is nothing but a hacker and that's all I do. Great. Okay, let's get into the hacking rules. Wow, you just dominate. Game master kind of throws their hands up and goes, fine, you're always in. But the minute they throw a challenge where it doesn't work, the die rolls don't go in your favor or something, now it's like, oh, well, let's see. I can't talk my way out of anything. I don't know how to shoot a gun. I don't have any other, I've literally hyper focused my character to the point where they're not fast or quick or strong, or what am I going to do? And then that person feels like they're useless. So unfortunately, a build, a specialized hyper focused build that doesn't have a character concept behind it that exists in this world tends to just have a very short shelf life.
Yeah. But I think the more advanced players know that there are a couple of things every character should be able to. For example, in Shadowrun, you should have some ranks in perception. You should know how to fast talk a bit. You should maybe know how to do first aid, and maybe you have to at least one weapon you should be halfway competent at. That's stuff I think most Shadowrun players would agree should every character kind of have.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott Poe brings up something about Shadowrun, but I think can apply to just about any game. He says, I guess, well, he says, and this is referring to Shadowrun. Shadowrun uses a dice pool system, but he says, I guess those variables in deciding how many dice to blow on a dodge or soak, etc., make it exciting for us. That just sounded missing in the podcast. More generally, when there's plenty of options, to decide. Okay, let me be more specific.
Um,
Instead of just the players making a roll to do or not do something, sometimes the having them have to make hard decisions uh, to do something in a heist can also get the tension going. For example, one player character could escape and then just the guards won't. Getting all three people out, it might be more difficult. We might need to, like, say, steal a vehicle or something. So in
um,
other words, what I'm saying is giving them one or I mean having two or more options in front of them so that they have a choice as to how to handle the situation. So don't just make only one single way to steal the plans or only one single way to escape with the corporate
you should
you know
you should generally never do that. If I had one advice to planning a heist as a GM is don't assume a specific way your players will handle the situation. Just make up the place, make up the persons in there, make up the defenses, the security, and just let them go on it. Don't assume you know what they will do because they won't. Maybe you just assume they will sneak in and they just run in guns blazing, mowing everyone down just to install this one program. For some reason, they think that will work. They will do that. You don't. You can't assume your players to do a specific thing. Even in dungeons, you can't, and that's the most controlled situation you can possibly get, where you basically can lay out, okay, first they have to do this room, then they have to do this room, and then suddenly they burst down a wall or whatever and suddenly the situation completely changed, and you can't do that. It doesn't work.
Yep. Yeah. Don't just what is it? Create the problem. Don't create the solution. Just get guaranteed it will not work the way you're thinking. And like you said, even a dungeon, you can make a dungeon extremely linear, one room and then one room and one room. But when it comes to like high tech heists, you have no idea what they're going to do. Like you said, you're thinking they're going to sneak in. Instead, they want to shoot up the place. You think they're going to drive in through the front gate and sneak in and talk to the guards. Instead, they rent some kind of like hovercraft or something or a helicopter and jump in on the roof. Just let the players handle the situation, and then you as the game master just have to uh, deal with how they're trying to perform the heist in a fair and reasonable manner. Don't force feed them, force them down a funnel of only one method of doing something. Allow, especially if they come up with a great idea, don't crush the great idea. Don't do that because your players will
that,
really resent that. They will
that that's
absolutely.
that that's the big reason why you should play an RPG and not something like a computer game where you just have a puzzle to solve when going in. If you're playing an RPG, you are simply assumed to be able to do anything you can think about or what your characters are possibly capable of. So you should be able to do so. You should be able to improvise. You should be able to try different approaches, not just doing the thing the game engine allows you to do, because the game engine is basically your imagination.
Yeah, there's plenty of people, and there's no way to list the thousands of video games where you need a specific key to go to get to the next level or open up a door or something. And you spend hours and hours going back through what you've already done to find this key, and then you're restarting the whole time because your player the character dies and you're resetting and spawning or whatever the case may be to get this one simple key or this one a series of events to put it in order to get to the next level of a game. That's so frustrating.
Yeah, and especially if the world doesn't support it. Let's assume you're playing as something like a super powered character which can destroy giant robots, but then suddenly you can't break open this fucking door.
Yeah. I think there was it was I was watching a friend of mine play one of the original war earlier series of God of War or something, and he needed He had to. His character had to swim to a certain part of the game to retrieve or unlock something that would like drain the water or whatnot, and he spent hours and hours trying to swim because the game funneled you into having to dive down in the water and swim from one direction to another. And no matter how expertly he did it, he would die because he couldn't get to the end, not realizing that he's like, okay, I need this helmet like from Neptune or something that allowed him to breathe underwater, hidden somewhere else in the game, right? So it set up a problem that could not be overcome by the capabilities of someone without this one thing. And it was, and he's the whole time he's like, I've got to find this damn helmet. Where is it? And he's going around and poking and prodding the walls and all the, you know, and that can get, when you're by yourself with a video game, you've got your own time to waste. When you're in a group with other people and you have a real life and you only have a limited amount of time, you don't want to waste, you yourself don't want to waste that time, yet let alone waste other people's times. So as a game master, it's like, don't do that. If they come up with a great idea, and it's, in many times I know I'm only one person. If you're surrounded by 4 other people, there's a multiple of at least 4 times greater chance they're going to come up with a better idea than yours. Then you just go with it, you know? Oh, wow, they came up with a great idea. That makes more sense. Cool, go for it, you know? Yeah, don't do that in a heist.
I think especially in a heist, you have to be able to allow the players to do what they want. Don't just go there and assume that they are the person who gives them the job just says what exactly they have to do, in what order and in what time, and that's just bullshit. That's something you shouldn't do generally. You can do it maybe sometimes if just to mix things up a bit, but generally you should give them something they have to accomplish and then let them go.
Yeah. And okay, so the last thing I'll say to the heist is some heists are very simple. Kill this person, whether it's like assassination or something, steal a program, I don't know. Some heists can be very, very
Steal a person.
Right. Yes. But if your players start to get a little bit bored with it, or you think they're ready for something more, have a multi-tiered heist. So a multi-tiered heist to me is like, you want to, the enemy thinks you're stealing something, but all you're really doing is replacing one item with another. So you're not going in running and gunning, or you could, because it's a cover to replace their financial records with a virus. And so you're supposed to leave it there. Or while you're doing this one heist, you also need to do something else. So it could be you need to steal the plans for a new like a new missile system, but at the same time, there's also a space vehicle that they have plans for as well. So half of you need to go steal the records for the blueprints for the missile, and the other half of you have to steal the vehicle. That's this high-tech vehicle.
Maybe, or the classic distraction, just distract the guards, lure them here so we can do our job. It's even possible in Shadowrun to do something like a run, which is nothing but a cover for another run from another group.
Absolutely. So sometimes changing the parameters a little bit can change the difficulty without literally so-called nerfing the player characters. So like you said, if we need a distraction, we don't want you to just kill the guards. We want you to draw them away to a specific location, or you can fight the guards and as much as you want, but we want you to continue the fight for at least a half an hour, you know, as an example. Or we don't want this to look like a military incursion. We want this to look like a natural accident. So you might have to start a fire or have an accident, like a vehicle accident in front of the building, or medical emergency, or smoke fills the rooms and make an evacuation. You could have a series of this has happened in many movies and books where you set the alarm off with something simple. The guards reset the alarm. You set the alarm off again with something simple,
Yeah.
and over until the guards just turn the alarm off completely to allow you to sneak in. So it could be, you know,
You
a
could do
window is
something like you could maybe do a chain of runs where you have to get a favor from this person first. Then this person gives you another piece of information, which leads you to the next run. Then you have to get a specific type of equipment. Then you have to do a side run for that. And you could basically make a whole campaign out of a chain of different heists you have to do to get to the end.
Yeah, that as a matter of fact, that's actually quite a common thing, especially in television, right? Hey,
Yeah.
we need to speak to okay, we're speaking to the street level criminal, but I need to speak to your boss. Okay, so there's the social interaction. Maybe there's even some like posturing and some physical stuff. You beat up the street level thugs. You talk to the main bad guy. That main bad guy is like, hey, well, I'll make a deal with you, and here's some information. And then the next episode, they have this new information from a crime boss that maybe has to deal with a politician, right? So now they have to talk to the politician. Well, the politician, he's got guards around him, and he's got connections with the corporate entities or something. So now the players have to get dressed up in fine clothes to go to a dinner or whatever. And in his room, he's got his laptop. He's never seen without it. So they have to, keep people distracted. And that's the second episode. They get that information. Oh, wow. The politician's in the pocket of this super ultra rich corporate individual, right? And they're taking, they're laundering money for a major criminal organization that leads back to the beginning or something. So you could have multiple heists to get information, and then you could spread the little spotlight around, like, hey, this character's social. We'll help out the social character. Oh, this person's the hacker. We'll help them out. These people are the, like to run and gun. So we're going to help them out, and can spread it around that way.
Yeah, I remember just the series Burn Notice, where they had one idea. He wanted to know why he got burned or kicked out of the CIA, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, he was an agent for the CIA, and he didn't know why, and he had to stay in this one city. And basically, most of the things he did was just to get the next piece of information he needed to go on. It's basically a whole episode just for one name or for one number or whatever, and just to get a little bit closer to his goal every time.
Yeah, that Burn Notice was a really great show.
Oh yeah,
the way it was written is very funny. They had a really unique way of using, because it was a low budget show, but they had a very unique way of being able to hide the low budgetness, because realistically, it's like, I can't leave this town. I'm going, really? You're a friggin' world traveling spy. You can leave at least once. But
I think he did in a couple of episodes, but it was really rare.
Yeah. But again, Burn Notice, like you said, it always leads to the next thing and the next thing. And I'll end it with, sometimes we game masters like to have the little mystery box. Like, you have to figure out the mystery. I'm here to tell you, don't do that. If the players really don't figure it out, just give them the clues. Just give it. I can sit all day and think of this great idea about how amazing it would be to reveal this special secret, and the players will never get it. It doesn't mean that they have any lack of understanding. It just means that they're not coming at your game from your perspective. Sometimes they're just not going to figure it out. So there are some narrative games that have already dealt with the situation where they say, listen, the clues, they're going to automatically get the clues.
Gumshoe.
Gumshoe's a perfect example. I couldn't remember the name of it. I was trying to get it. Gumshoe's perfect example of the. We're not going to make it difficult to get the clues. They're going to get the clues. What we're going to do is
just an explanation for Gumshoe. You basically, if you have a specialization in a specific topic, you automatically find all the clues associated to that specialization. So, for example, if you are good at biology, you would automatically find all the larvae in the corpse, or find any specific insects lying around, or mold, or whatever. And if someone else is a specialist in ballistics, he would automatically know where the trajectories of all the guns and whatever. That's he doesn't have to roll for that. He just gets it automatically. Yeah, that's just sorry. You can go on.
Oh no, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, listen, don't make the mystery box too difficult. Hit them in the head with the clue stick. Bang! Here's the next clue. You've gotten the information. Now you could be hyper specific, and this is metagaming. You could say, "Hey, you went on a heist. You did all these things, but you find this disc that's super encrypted. You don't know what's on it, and cliffhanger. Wait till the next game." Right? Like, you could specifically say, you broke into the system, you got everything you needed, but there's this bit of information you're not sure what it is. It's a clue, guys. This is just to get you guys to come back the next game, right? It's the cliffhanger. It's the
and that's a great motivation for the characters. If you give them something they don't know and they maybe get it, I assure you, the hacker will spend the next 3 sessions just trying to crack this one thing.
Yep.
And he will invest all the resources he has to. No questions asked, even if it's just a letter from his mom. It doesn't matter really. That's the interesting part about the mystery. This doesn't really matter what the mystery is, because once you know what it isn't interesting anymore. As long as it is a mystery, it's good. I think that's something the maker of Lost sometimes said, that the mystery box is the interesting part. It's not interesting what's in it. The box is the interesting thing. Even if it would be empty, it would still be interesting.
There are some movie makers who've done the one movie that comes to mind is the movie called Ronin, about these spies. And in the actual movie, there is a case that everyone is trying to get. Is a locked secure suitcase. And when any person opens up the suitcase, a glowing light comes and shines on their face, and you never find out what's in the case.
Pulp Fiction, yeah.
Pulp Fiction. It doesn't matter. It's just a MacGuffin. It's this thing that everyone wants, and if the player characters find something they can't crack, it's a black box, and it has a plug in the side of it, and there's no buttons on it, and you can't crack it because it's super hyper encoded or something, and needs a palm print plus a retina scan plus something else, whatever. Yeah, they will latch onto it and not let go. And what a great way for your players to come back the next game. Hey guys, well, there's someone that you have a connection with. You might have to travel to another country, travel to an orbit to find someone who's a recluse, who's able to open up this thing. Let's go. And then you have your next game. And then at the end of that heist, leave another little clue for something, whether it's a tattoo or
I needed a special kind of tool to open it, and now you have to get this tool, and then you have to get the material to make the tool, and you could really be nasty with this stuff.
Yeah. What's another traditional one? You find a best friend who just happens to die just when you get there, and drops a note in your hand, or says some archaic words, or gives you a key with no explanation to it or something, and you're like, what? Wait, what? Wait, it took me 18 hours to get here, and you died 30 seconds.
That's what happened with Burn Notice all the time. He did the fucking thing. He made everything happen, and then it just got a number with no context, or he got a key or whatever, and he had to find out what the fuck it means, and that's the next breadcrumb you have to find. And
Yep.
I think it would be super fun to have something like a campaign for that. I always thought about a fantasy campaign, which is nothing but one riddle. Maybe you got one riddle box right at the start, and the campaign is nothing, just opening this riddle box. That's the campaign.
Like you said, it wouldn't even matter what's in it.
No.
I don't even know if you could match the expectation of what would be in it.
Yeah, there was this short film Sunday where the two strangers found a treasure map, and they got on this great adventure and got best friends and learned magic, and the other one learned sword fighting. At the end, they just found a mirror where they saw what they become one day going on it in this adventure.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was the treasure.
That's awesome. That's real poignant. I like that. I like the way that ends. It's like here's a mirror and look what.
And at the end, they gave it to some random kids. The treasure map.
That's wow. That's awesome. What a big circle, man. It's
like, yeah.
Wow, what? That's cool. That's great. So anyway, of course, these hour things go for an hour and a half and whatnot. Thanks. By the way, Vince, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it's always great to have somebody. I like the back and forth, but yeah. Thanks, Scott, for waking up in Arizona at like 3 o'clock in the morning or something.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he's like it's like 3 or 4 in the morning for him, and then so it's crazy. Yeah, so you're up and he's just
don't you sleep or anything?
I know, it's crazy, but so, and I will remind you, Scott, great chat, guys. Yeah, we're talking about you too, man. But daylight savings time here in the States will be coming up pretty soon. I don't know. They're just going to have the usual problems with the time schedules and all those kind of things. So I have a night spot.
I'm not sure when we have it.
I don't know. I can't stand. I wish why we still have it.
Yeah, they want to change it in Europe now. They have they are asking for signatures for that. It's just bullshit. They should just change it. There's no reason to have it anymore.
I know. Scott says I have kids, so this is me time. Dude, I get it. I mean, there's nothing. I joke because I understand.
Okay.
But I wish. I wish time. Why we even have it any longer, for any reason, is beyond me.
I think the problem is that we think we don't have time. I think we have more time than we think we have. That's the thing. You just have to make priorities.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely agree. So, Vince, thank you very much for joining me. Anybody else? No problem. Anyone else who I don't know everyone or anyone who's able to make it through these vlogcasts. I enjoy them. I'm not sure about anyone else. Thanks, Scott Poe, for joining us. I'm sure there's people who watch them. I'm getting 50 to 60 views or something like that. So there's people out there that's like participating.
You could listen to it while doing something else.
That's because that's what I do with other people's videos, man. If they're really long or they've got like a live stream or something, I just listen to them at work, which is great. So thanks for joining us, guys. And till next time, Sunday is a creators conclave at 6 a.m. and then we go into Monster Monday again. So
can't be that sadly, but have fun.
No problem. Thank you. All right, guys. I'll see you later.